All right, it is 8 o'clock, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to day 26 of the Rankin Technical College online AWD 1100 C# programming class for the summer 2023 semester. Again, I think it's day 26. I believe I've got that right. All right, last day of this week. So today what we're going to start with is we're going to take the Chapter 12 pretest as a class. I'm going to go over the entire pretest, then we're going to create it, write it together. If you don't want to code along with me, I am going to save it and put it out there as a GitHub repo by the end of the lecture. Now, that'll take somewhere 2 to 3 hours. I don't know, maybe 2 hours, maybe 1 to 2 hours. We'll see. I'm going to do it nice and slow and try to explain things as we're going through it. That'll be the first video. That'll be public. And again, the GitHub repo will be made available to you later today. Then I'm going to go back to the calculator program we did yesterday. Now, my wife asked me this morning because I told her I still had an error in it last night. So she said, does it work now? And yes and no. And I'm going to show you that as well. All right, so again, today we'll take the Chapter 12 pretest as a class. I emailed you the pretest yesterday. All right, there are no classes next Monday, July 3rd. There are no classes Tuesday, July 4th for the 4th of July observance. So when we come back again, it will be Wednesday, July 5th, a week from yesterday. On that day at 7 a.m., I will email you the Chapter 12 hands-on test, hot number 5. You will have the entire period to work on it, other than at 8 o'clock. As always, I will go over the instructions for about 15 minutes and save that. All right. And then you'll have the rest of the period to work on it, the rest of the day, and it'll be due by midnight. 1 week from today, on the 6th of July, we will go over Muroc chapter 13 and chapter 14. All right. For those of you who still haven't turned in your work yet for chapters 9 through 11, it was now due more than a week ago. So you will be hit with a penalty, points penalty, because it's late. But if it's done and the quality is there, you'll still get most of the points. Again, there will be no classes next Monday or next Tuesday for the 4th of July observance. I will not be online, all right, to my knowledge, but I will check a few times a day for emails. And finally, a week ago yesterday, or a week from yesterday, on July 5th, we will take hands-on test 5, or hot number 5. So that's good. And let's go in here and take a look at this hands-on test. Now, much of it is similar in nature to things we've done before. Some of it's new, some of it's not. So as it says, create this GUI application right here. I'm not gonna, I yesterday even showed you 4 buttons, 10 text boxes, 6 of which are read only, 10 regular size labels, 1 label for the title. That's our interface. All right. I'm going to add the validator class to this. I'm going to add an employee class to this. All right. So we will build the interface. Then I will set the accept button, the cancel button, the start position, and the tab order as always. Then I will add the validator.cs class. Then I will add the employee class. After we do all that, we'll go back in to here and we'll write the actual code for it. For that validator, as it says, we will validate to make sure that there is something in the first and last name fields. We will make sure that the value for hours worked and hourly rate is numeric, and we will make sure that it's within range. So in other words, we'll run the is present part of validator.cs. We will run that on first name and last name. We will run both the is decimal and the is within range on hours worked and on hourly rate. Now, when I go in and add the validator.cs class, I'm not going to add the is int 32 in there, or an is double or anything. We're just going to have the two that are shown here, is present and is decimal. All right, hopefully that makes some sense. Now, when we go in to create the employee class, this is what it'll be. All right. It'll have 5 auto-implemented properties, first name and last name of type string, hours worked hourly rate, and gross pay of type decimal. In addition, our employee class will have 2 methods, a calculate gross pay where we will account for overtime, and a toString method, which we really have not talked too much about, but we will today. Then we'll create a global employee list variable called employees. And as it says, each time we've got a valid employee. So each time there is something in the first name, there is something in the last name, there is an hour's work that is numeric and is within range, there is an hourly rate that is within range, then we will add that new employee to our list, and we will show a formatted message box that'll verify this works by showing all the information for the employee, and like it is here. I know that doesn't resonate well. All right. All of the final totals should be updated each time we add a valid employee as well, meaning we should add, after we figure out their gross pay, we should add 1 to the total employees. We should add that gross pay to the total gross pay. If we have a new low gross, it should replace whatever was in there. If we have a new high gross, it should replace what's ever in there. And we should update the average gross pay as well. All right. And that's pretty much what this says in here. Finally, when you click the button that says show list, we're going to get a message box that's going to look like this one, except for the fact that rather than showing a single employee, it'll show us every employee that we put in. So if we have 10 employees, it'll be pretty big, but it should show all 10. All right. I think that's pretty much everything as far as what we're doing. Okay. So again, as it says, we're doing this pretest as a class. And as I create it, I'll try to add at least some comments so you'll know what's going on. As always, if you watch this tape later and you have questions, please email me. I'll be glad to go over them with you as necessary. All right. So with that said, I'm going to basically do this the way that I usually do it, and that is I'm going to come in here and first I'm going to create a new folder, and it's going to be called Employee 12 Pretest, because I know I don't have anything called that. And to just make my life a little bit easier, all right, I'm going to immediately come in here to github.com, and I'm going to create a new repository, and it will be called Employee 12 Pretest. All right, and I will create it. Now I'm going to come and grab that remote line, copy that to the clipboard. Then I'm going to come back into here. There's nothing in here right now, but I am going to come in and do a git bash here, do my git init. There's my folder. All right. And I'm going to just paste this in. I'm not going to do a git add dot and a git commit. There's nothing to add or commit yet, but I am going to paste in that. So now if I do a git remote -v, it shows that in my GitHub repository, JP Scott Rankin, there will be an employee 12. All right, I'll keep this open. It won't matter one way or the other. So let's go in and let's start up a new session of Visual Studio, or attempt to do so. Here we go. All right, so we're going to create a new project. It will be a Windows Form project. All right, and again, we just call this Employee 12 Pretest. So I will call this Employee 12 Pretest project, and I will call the solution employee 12 pretest solution. Plus, I will set my location. So go back to the desktop. Come on. And there's my employee 12 pretest. So the only thing that's in there right now is that Git folder. All right. So I will select that. It's all set. And I'm going to click create. And there it is. Now, this has got to be widened out a little bit. Okay. I've even saved basically my what I want the sizes, etc., of this to be. So let's start by just going in here and let's rename the form as FRM employee. That should be fine. Yes, we want to change it. And let's change the text right away on there to chapter. How about this? AWD 1100 hyphen chapter 12 pretest. Simple enough. And there that is. All right, I'm going to change the color as I always do. Let's use that one right there. That should work. And that's good. That's a good start. And now I'm going to resize the form accordingly, because I want it to be big enough to hold everything I want to put in there. All right, so there's my form. All right, first thing we had in there was a really big, we had a really big label stretched almost all the way across. So let me create that label. There it is. As always, let me set the auto size on here to false. And let's set the background color. This is going to be really wide and big, something like that. All right. And the other ones, of course, are not going to be nearly as big or as wide. So start with that. I believe at least I'm also going to go and change the foreground color of my text to white. So I think that'll resonate better. All right, so this big label right here, I'm going to call it LBL title because it is the title. All right, and I want the size to be changed. There we go. Not too much, a little bit. That looks pretty good. So for the title, again, I'm taking this right from the test page. It was chapter 12, pretest, creating an employee class. All right, and of course, let's come in and change the text size on all this stuff. All right, and it looks like the word employee, I screwed it up, but we'll fix that right now. All right, and finally, we want to take all these and we want them to be centered. All right, so there's my start. Next, I'm going to put in here, again, we're going to have, I believe it's 10 labels. And each label, again, I set up for the size on these two. So that's the size of the labels I'm going to have. So we're going to have a label here, a label here, a label here, and a label here. Try to space them out so that it looks decent. All right, that's not bad. And let's copy this and paste because we're going to have also labels over here. All right. So we've got our labels done. Let's make our first text box. And we're going to do pretty much the same thing here. And what I mean is, all right, that what we're going to want is to set the font size up for this as well. All right, so we've got that. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's move these over a little. In fact, let's move everything over a little. Looks like it'll work. All right, and we're going to put these in here. Okay, that's not too bad. Finally, we'll put in our 4 buttons. I'm going to go back and rename all this stuff, of course, in just a second. So you'll see it. Okay. Again, not too bad looking of an interface right there. All right. Again, I want to change the size that's going to go into the text or the buttons as well. There we go. Now we're pretty much off to the races, so to speak. So let me do do this. I like these centered. So I'm going to set the text align to center on here. And I'm also going to set the text align to center on here. All right, now let's do a Control A to highlight everything. And let's lock the interface into place. All right, so let's start now. So this is first name. So it will be LBL first name. Which of course makes this TXT first name. All right. This will be last name, so it'll be LBL last name with the text last name. And that makes this TXT last name. All right. This one will be LBL hours worked. And the text will be hours worked. All right. Which will make this TXT hours worked. All right. This will be hourly rate, so LBL hourly rate with the text hourly rate. And this will be TXT hourly rate. All right. And this will be gross pay, so it'll be LBL gross pay. And the text will be gross pay. This will be TXT gross pay. All right, so we've got all that done. We're getting there. All right. This will be total employees. So it will be LBL total employees. That might be close, so I might have to put total employees in there. So let's see. Yep. So I spelled total wrong. So let's just put in there tote employees and see if it takes that. Oh, we'll fix that right now. So, all right. So this will end up being LBL total employees, which will make this one TXT total employees. All right. And the next one, all right, we're building, we're going through the pretest for chapter 12. We're going to build this as a class. So as you can see, I've got the interface set up and I've got about half of it built here. So I'm right into here. So this next label, this will be LBL total gross pay. All right, how did I set it up on here? So we call employees. I guess I made these wider, but that's okay. I can say tote instead of total. It doesn't really matter if I have to. So this will say tote gross pay. How about just total gross? Okay. And this will be TXT total gross pay. Okay. And going down to the next one, this is the low gross pay. So we will call this LBL low gross pay. And for the text there, I'm just going to put low gross. All right, and this will become then TXT low gross pay. All right, this will be LBL high gross pay with the text high gross. All right, this will be TXT high gross pay. All right, and finally, this is the average. So this will be LBL average gross pay. And we will put in there for the text AVG gross. And then this will be TXT average gross pay. Finally, all that's left now are our 4 buttons. So this one will be calculate. Seen me do this countless times. BTN calculate, which I spelled wrong. And it'll have the face on it of, or the text on it of calculate. This next one will be show list. So it'll be BTN show list with the text show list. This one will be clear. So it'll be BTN clear with the text clear. And this one will be our exit. So it will be BTN exit with the text rather of exit. Now, we haven't been doing this much, but let's do a couple more things here. So for the calculate, let's put an ampersand before the C in calculate. Okay, and then put that little underscore there. So we can now do an alt C, I think at least to call this. For the show list, we'll put it before the S. For the clear, since we already are using the C, we'll put it before the L. And finally, for the exit, because it's kind of an unwritten standard, you put it. So we've got all that done. All right, let's click on here and let's set what we normally set. So the accept button will set the BTN calculate. The cancel button will set the BTN clear. The start position we will set to center screen. So that's all that stuff. And these 6 text boxes, gross pay, total EMPS, total gross, low gross, high gross, and average gross are all going to be read-only. Didn't seem to like that when I highlighted them like that, so let's do it again. Let's try that again. So this will be read-only, and these will also be read-only. All right, so all of that has been set. Let's do our tab order, which will make 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So we have 25 controls on this form. All right, so view tab order. And again, it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Do another view tab order. Now, just because it's a good idea, I'm going to do a file save all on here. All right. And that'll be the calculate that we'll write much later. That will be the show list that we'll write much later. There's our clear. And there's our exit. Now we can write those two right now. For our clear, we'll want to just basically clear all 5 of these. These are totals, so we're not going to want to clear those. So we'll want to clear first name, last name, hours worked, hourly rate, and gross pay, because those are the individual totals. All right, so and then we want to set the focus right here. So that isn't too bad. We'll call our old clear all, which I'll put right below that. All right, we're not going to be able to, well, we can actually test that, but we can only test the 4, we can only test the 4 text boxes that are not read-only, but we can look at that. So let's try it. So we should be able to put stuff into here, into here, into here, into here. I'm going to put my cursor there, click clear. They cleared and my cursor's back. That's good. All right, we'll have our exit program or not in here. And normally I have this written out, but I don't, so I'm just going to steal it from an old program. There that is. Have the whole thing, so I'm just going to paste that in. And it should be a capital E. So now let's see if I can test that. All right, so everything is working thus far. I've created the interface. And in addition, out of the 4 buttons that we have, those being the calculate button, the show list button, the um, clear button, and the exit button, I now have written all the code for the clear button and for the exit button. So those are done. All right. The next thing I'm going to do, and I'm taking this right from our book, that is I'm going to add a new class, and that'll be the validator.cs class. All right, so I'm doing that one next. I'm going to right mouse click on here, choose add, and choose, double check something here. Okay, want to make sure I was taping. All right. All right. So I'm going to right mouse click on here, choose add, go down to class. And just as they did it in our book, I'm going to put in here validator, validator.cs. And we're going to write that now. All right. It is public. All right. In addition, we want to be able to use those methods that are in there without creating a validator object. So we're going to make this static. I want to say this again. We made the class public so that it's able to be used not only in this program, but if we wanted to, in other programs, and we made it static. By making it static like that, we are going to be able to call the is present and the is within range methods without having to create a validator object. If we didn't make it static, that wouldn't happen. We wouldn't be able to do that. So again, I'm taking this stuff right out of the Muroc text. So we're going to start with private, static, string, line end, and that's going to be equal to \n, just as, like I said, same way it is in the book. And then we're going to right away come in public, static, string, line end, and we will put in there a get and a set. All right. So for the get, return line end, and for the set, line end equal value. Now, some people like to write it like this. Some people like to go out and put everything on its own line. As you probably guess, it really and truly does not matter. All right. So we've got that. Now we've got to write the is present and the is decimal, and I guess the is within range. So we're going to write all of those right now. Again, taken right out of the textbook. All right. Notice that since the class is static, we are also making the methods in here static. We will make all the other 3 methods that we're about to put in here will all be static. So public, static, string, that'll be that is present, and we'll have string value and string name. All right, so let's write this. So there's our first one. That is checking for the presence or the absence of something in one of the fields. We're going to use this again on both the first name and the last name. All right. So if there is nothing in the first name field or in the last name field, we're just going to have a message that'll pop up that'll say first name is a required field or last name is a required field. All right. So that's the first one. Let's write the second one. Oops. So it'll be also public static string. This one will be the is decimal. And again, what they showed in that validator one in the textbook is they had more than what I'm putting in. And what I mean is we don't really have any reason in ours to do an is int 32 because we don't have any integer variables in here. Or if there was an is double or an is Boolean, we wouldn't have to put those in because we're not using those variables in here. All right, it's going to be very similar to what we just did. So I'm going to copy this. And then we'll make the associated changes. So we've got a message, but now we don't want to check if it's empty or not. All right. What we want to do is we want to attempt to parse this. All right. So I'm going to say if not decimal dot try parse. It's going to be the value, and that's going to be whatever we pass in. And we're not going to use it in here, so we'll just use that discard value as they show right here, and we need another paren. All right. So here we don't say it's a required field. We say must be a valid decimal value. Like that. And that's the one for checking to see whether or not it is decimal. Again, I omitted from the book the public static string is in 32 because we do not have one of those types of variables in here. All right, so that's the second one. That's our is decimal. Let's put in the last one that we'll need here. And that is the is within range. We will again have to pass in a string for the value and a string for the name. But in addition, we'll also have to pass in some more stuff. And that will be a decimal for our minimum value and another decimal for our maximum value. All right. Again, taken right out of the textbook. All right. So just like before, we're going to have string, message, and initialize a string. All right. And say if. All right. We're going to have that same try parse that we just did. This thing. But if this succeeds, then we want to say if number, and we don't have a variable called number. All right. So let's put it into a variable we'll just here call number. All right. Now we don't have a variable that's called number, but I'm going to actually make that in the program, or we could just come in here. We could do it like this too. I think this will work just fine. We could come in and say decimal number like that. Okay. So now if that number is less than our minimum, or that number is greater than our maximum, well, we know we've got a problem. All right. So again, we want to come in here and we want to put in a message. So let me just put this in here, our return message. All right. And somehow I lost a curly brace there. Fix that. So let's put in our message here. So message. And notice here, I'm using plus equal and plus equal because it's possible if we leave a numeric field empty, it should say the name of that field, like hours worked must be a decimal value. And it'll also say then that hours worked must be between like 0 and 84 or whatever. All right. And I'm going to put this over a couple lines. Plus sign. That's why it's giving me an error right now. All right. So that's everything. We have now come in and written our static, our validator class, which is static. And again, when something like this is static, it typically implies two things. First, we're going to be able to go in and actually create. We're going to be able to go in and I should say create. We are going to be able to call these methods. So we can call the is present, the is decimal, and the is within range, but we don't have to create a brand new validator object. Instead, we'll use the name of the class. We can say validator dot is present, validator dot is decimal, and validator dot is within range. It's a much cleaner way of doing things. So I don't think I've missed anything here. Taking a quick look over it. And this stuff is all junk we've done before. The only one that's sort of new is this one. All right. So let me do a file save all here. All right. And then let's go to our next class. So we're going to create another class, but before we do, let's just take a look at, because you were shown this, what that class should hold. All right. So we're going to make a class. We're going to call it employee.cs. All right. And it's going to hold a few things in it. All right. What things? Well, it's going to have a first name, which is a string, a last name, which is a string, an hours worked, which is a decimal, an hourly rate, which is a decimal, and a gross pay, which is a decimal. In addition, we're going to, we will set up, of course, we will set up a single constructor that'll expect all 5 of these things to be passed in. All right. Plus, since they're auto-implemented properties, we'll set each one up as a get set. We don't have to worry about validating because we have our validator class. All right, and that'll handle the validation. Okay. Now, we're also going to have 2 methods in here. Calculate gross pay. That's going to account for overtime. So that will necessitate me creating a couple more variables. One, and I'm going to actually make them constants. I'm going to call it max straight, and I'm going to set it equal to 40. What does that mean? It means that 40 will be the maximum number of hours that you can work. 40 will be the maximum number of hours that you can work without getting paid any overtime. So anything between 0 and 40 will be straight time. In other words, hours worked times hourly rate. The other one that I'm going to set is going to be called overtime rate. And it's going to be, these are both decimals. So both max straight and overtime rate will be decimals. Max straight will be set to 40.00 M. Overtime rate will be set to 1.5 M, like time and a half. All right. In addition, we're going to override this toString method. Now you might say, well, what the heck is toString? I think at least it'll make more sense when we go back to our actual form and start using it in there. Okay, hopefully at least it'll make sense. All right. So let's come in and let's write our employee class. It's not a long class or a large class. So let's do that right now. So I've already done this one, the validator. Again, I'm going to do one more file, save all. And for now, at least, I'm just going to close the validator. I can open it up if I want, whenever I want. So I'm going to right mouse click on the name of the project, choose add, go down to class, and I'm going to call this one employee.cs. There it is. All right, this one will not be static, but we will make it public. So we are going to create employee objects. So we want to be able to do an employee dot something, that kind of thing. All right, so if I create an employee named Jeff, I want to be able to say Jeff dot. So this one is not static. All right. So as mentioned, I said there will be two program constants. And the first one is a decimal that's called max straight. These are just arbitrary names that I came up with, and it's equal to 40.00 M. And the other one, whoops, is going to be called overtime rate. All right. And that is going to be set equal to 1.50 M. And as I already mentioned, basically, that is time and a half. All right. And the reason that I need these two constants, the reason that I need these two constants is because, all right, I'm going to be doing a calculation for a person's gross pay. All right. Now, we're told in here, if you look, that we should have all of these. All right. And it says that we should set these up as auto implemented properties. Well, that's true, except I didn't make gross pay an auto implemented property. Why? Because gross pay is something that's going to be calculated. All right. You don't calculate first name. You don't calculate last name. You don't calculate hours worked. You don't calculate hourly rate. Those are values that are input into the program. So it made sense for those to be set up with auto implemented properties. But since gross pay is something you calculated, I just went in and made that a quote regular instance variable. So in other words, I came in here and said private decimal underscore gross pay. Now, one of the questions that I get asked sometimes, at least by people, is okay, I even sort of get that, but can you tell me when we're doing that, how do you know? How do you know when to do this and when to do that? And with much of it, you don't. You experiment and you learn over time. All right. Now, I will tell you, I may have told you this before. I may have, I don't remember. But when I was hired into my first programming job, they asked me if I knew the C programming language, not C sharp, C. And I wasn't going to lie during the interview. So I said, no, I don't. And I said, but I do know. And I was telling them, and they said, we don't care. And the guy was actually happy. And I said, you're happy I don't know the programming language you use? And he said, yes. And I said, well, why is that? He said, because at the local college here, we've got a course in C programming, and it's taught by one of our senior programmers. So they teach you to code C the Bell Labs way, is the way that he put it. All right. So, I mean, the takeaway from that is, when you start working with this stuff, if you get a job, and you're interviewing, first of all, and I don't think I'm saying anything out of the ordinary here, be honest. If you don't know something, just tell them you don't know, but also say, but I want to learn. All right. But if it's a language that you've never used, you feel free to tell them that. Okay. So if let's say that I was going for a job as a Java programmer, and they'd say, how much Java experience do you have? I'd say none. Say, well, do you know Java? No, I do. But if you were in the program here, you could say, well, I don't, but I've taken two courses that have used the C sharp programming language. And from what I understand, there is a high correlation between C sharp and um, and Java, something like that. Okay, so next we need our constructor. So this will be public employee. Okay. And I'm going to pass into this constructor, just move this, all four of these things that I need, not the gross pay. Remember, that's calculated. So I'm going to pass in a string, and that string is going to represent the first name. I'm going to have another string that's going to represent the last name. Then I'm putting this on one line so you can see it. I'm going to have a decimal, which is going to be the hours worked, and another decimal, which is going to be the hourly rate. Now, you might have noticed, you might say, well, look at those names. They're not very good. These are placeholders, and it's totally fine. I could have put first name or first or F name, etc. It really and truly doesn't matter. Now, I'm going to get errors here if I put these in because I want to say, I want to use those auto implemented properties, but I haven't created those yet. So let's put those in right here. So I'm going to say here, auto implemented properties. So these will be public string first name, and there will be a get set in here. Public string last name with a get set. Okay, so there's my first two. Another public decimal. I don't want it to be price. Oops, so public, I can spell decimal, and this will be hours worked with, again, a get set. Have another public decimal with hourly rate, again, as a get set. So those are my auto implemented properties. I did them, so now I can come in here and say first name equals FN, last name equal LN. Notice how the IntelliSense is picking this up. Hours worked equals HW, and hourly rate equals HR. So all we're saying is whenever we create a brand new employee, we must pass in a string for their first name, a string for their last name, a decimal for their hours worked, and a decimal for the hourly rate. In other words, that is what the system will be expecting us to do. All right? Okay. Now, we're not done here yet because we have to create two more things. Remember, we had said that one of the things that we'll have to put in here is to figure out that gross pay. So I'm going to have here a public decimal, and I'm going to call it what it is, which is calculate gross pay. It doesn't need anything. It's returning a decimal, which will be the gross pay. So when we get all done, we're going to return gross pay. All right. Now we haven't done anything with it yet, so let's do that right now. This is exactly what you think it would be. In other words, if hours worked is less than or equal to max straight, all right, well, what do we know? No overtime worked for this employee. So in other words, their gross pay is going to be just equal to hours worked times hourly rate. Now that was pretty simple. We're not done yet. We still have to figure out if they did work overtime. But my hope is that you are now all getting to the point where at least logically you can see what's happening here. All right. So again, this is if the hours worked was less than or equal to 40. They have no overtime, so their gross is just their hours worked times their hourly rate. We'll put an else in here. And with this else, they did work overtime. So some overtime was worked by this employee. All right, I'm going to make that by as well. I think that sounds a little better. Now there's a way that we could figure this out. All right, I put everything together. So let me write this. You've seen this kind of thing before, but let me write all of it, then we'll go back and we'll look at it. All right. So I'm going to say my underscore gross pay is going to be equal to so that's the first 40 hours. That's 40 times the hourly rate. Okay, so that's the first amount of stuff that they've done. But then I have to do an hours worked minus max straight times, all right, I want all of this, let's see, to be, come on, Jeff, in its own set of parens. Okay, finally, that'll be times hourly rate times the overtime rate. And again, my hope is that all of you right now understand what's going on right there. All right. Looks like I'm missing a paren someplace. We're going to fix that in a minute. I'm not worried about that. All right. But let's pretend for a minute that the person worked 50 hours. I'm just going to put a comment here. I'm going to remove it in a minute. So person worked 50 hours. All right. So the first thing we want to do is we want to say max straight times hourly rate. So the first thing we're going to put in there, step one will be 40 times, let's say they make $10 an hour. Well, it's going to be a little nice to them. So let's say $20 an hour. So first we're going to say 40 times 20. And again, we can call that their straight or their non-overtime pay. All right. Then next, so that's this. And we need to add to that the hours that they worked minus straight. So that's going to be what? They worked 50 hours minus their straight. So minus 40. We'll put this inside of parentheses like it is there. So 50 minus 40 right there plus, I'm sorry, times. So 50 minus 40 times their hourly rate, which is 20, times their overtime rate, which is 1.5. So what is this? 40 times 20, you're all smart enough to know that's going to give us 800 bucks. All right. 50 minus 40, you do what's in the parens first. So 50 minus 40 is 10. 10 times 20 is 200. 200 times 1.5 is going to give us 300. So their whole gross pay is going to be 800 plus 300 or 1100. If we didn't include overtime there, if we did not do that, it would be 50 times 20 or 1,000. So they're getting $100 worth of overtime in there. All right. So for step 3 here, we would just say $800 plus $300, and that would be equal to $1,100. Okay. All right. Now let's see if we can figure out what the problem is here. It is saying that there is a paren expected. So I'm parenthesizing the entire thing. So there that is. And then when we're done, we return the gross pay. So we're either going to return their straight time gross pay, or we're going to return their overtime gross pay. And again, we are to the point in here, it has to start making sense to you. I don't know any other way to put it. So we've now come in and into our employee class, we have two constants that we're using. We just showed how they're using 40, which is the most hours you can work without overtime, and overtime rate, which is 1.5 or time and a half. We also have a non-auto implemented. So this is just I'll put in here, it's kind of a dumb comment, but I'll put in here, this is just a regular instance variable. So each time we create an employee and each time we give that employee an hours worked and an hourly rate, we are going to calculate that employee's gross pay. All right. For our constructor, we are assuming that what is done here as shown is we're passing in a first name, a last name, an hourly rate, an hours worked, and an hourly rate. We're just setting them. We don't worry about validating them here because in the form, we're going to be calling the is present, the is decimal, and the is within range. We're going to be calling those things from our actual validator class. All right. We do have 4 auto implemented properties here. First name, last name, hours worked, and hourly rate. All right. And finally, what we just did in here was we calculated the gross pay. And like I said, hopefully there's nothing in there that doesn't make sense to people. And if something doesn't, again, I don't know any other way. Oops. I don't know any other way to say it than this. And that is, you have to get a hold of me and let me know if something isn't making sense. All right. Now we're going to use this special method. And it already threw some code in there for us, which we're not going to use. All right. Now, when we get back to the actual form in just a few minutes, you'll see how this is used. I want to say that again. When we get back to our form in a couple minutes, you'll see how toString is used. All right. But what we're going to be able to do is we're going to say, hey, if I make an employee object named Jeff, and I tell you to print Jeff, all right, by default, if I don't override the toString method. So I'm going to say this again. If I create an employee object that's named Jeff, even if I set Jeff's first name, if I set Jeff's last name, if I set Jeff's hours worked, if I set Jeff's hourly rate, and if I correctly figure out Jeff's gross pay, if I just say print Jeff, it's not going to print all that stuff. I'd have to print Jeff dot first name, Jeff dot last name, Jeff dot hours worked, Jeff dot hourly rate, and Jeff dot gross pay. And I can do that. All right. But if I just say basically print Jeff, it's going to print the address in memory where that object is located or some other garbage. It's not going to print what I want unless I use this toString method. And again, you will see this in exactly how this is used. Please trust me. All right. Because we're going to put this in, we're going to go back to our program. I'm going to quickly add some tags. Then we're going to take a break. And then we're going to write the other one. All right. So we'll have here name plus first name plus a blank space plus last name. I don't know why it did that, but it did. So we'll fix that. All right. So last name plus a line break. All right. So in other words, if I'd entered Jeff Scott, this is going to end up printing for the name Jeff and then a space and then Scott. exactly what I'd want. And notice there's a line break, all right there, but I don't want to end that. I'm going to keep printing. So this will all be stuff that I'm printing for each employee. So next I'll say hours plus hours worked, but I want to do a dot two string on that. And I'm going to put in there an N2. So I'm going to print out the hours that they worked to 2 decimal points. All right. So again, I'll put in here plus \n plus, and now I'm going to put in here rate plus hourly rate dot to string. Again, this one will be done with currency because an hourly rate is a numeric figure. Plus \n plus, just like we just had. All right. And then finally, we'll put in here gross. And that'll be the underscore gross pay that we figured out before, dot to string. All right. In currency format. Oops. All right. And we will add, because after each employee, we'll want to make sure that we'll be able to put a blank line in between them like that. And since I'm a little squirrely here, I'm just going to, now I put that in. All right. So that looks a little weird, probably. But what this is going to do is if now I say print followed by the name of an employee, it's going to print their first name, a blank space, their last name. Well, it's going to print the title name, then a space, their first name, a space, and their last name. Then on the next line, it'll print hours, space, and the hours that they worked formatted to 2 decimal places. Then it again will print a blank line, or on the next line, it'll print rate and do the hourly rate again. That'll be the currency, then a new line, then it'll do the gross. That is everything in our employee class. So I want to do 2 more quick things, and then we're going to take a break. So I'm going to do a file, save all here. All right. And for now, at least, I'm going to close this employee thing. All right. I'm going back now to my form, and anything that I could conceivably want to jack with, and that's really these 5 things. It's things for each employee. So I'm going to come in here, and I don't know if I'm going to need these or not, but I'm going to put a tag in here, and I'm going to put in first name. I can put it in and have a blank space in there. So I've got first space name, and the F in first and the N in name are capitalized. This one will be last name, and I want to make sure they're the tags that I'm filling up, not the text or something else. So this has got a tag of first name. This has got a tag of last name. This will have a tag of hours worked. This will have a tag of hourly rate. And I really don't even need one for the gross pay because that's being calculated. Why did I put tags in here? Because when I call the validator, and if there's nothing in there, I want it to say first name is a required field. I want this one to say last name is a required field. With this one, we're not checking for the is present, but for this one, I want it to say if we don't put anything in or we put in something non-numeric, we want it to say hours worked must be a valid decimal value. And if we put in a number that's out of range, we want it to say hours worked must be between 0 and 84. And in the same way in here, All right. We want this just as well. All right. We want this right here. If there's nothing in there or something non-numeric, we want it to say hourly pay must be a valid decimal value. And if we put in an hourly rate that's less than zero, or if we put in an hourly rate that's greater than $99.99, which are what we're setting there as arbitrary values, we want it to say that hourly rate must be between 0.00 and 99.99. All right. So just to kind of back up, what we have done so far in the first hour and 10 minutes or so of this class, we created this user interface. All right. After we created the user interface, okay, we went in and wrote the validator class. After we wrote the validator class, we wrote the employee class. After we wrote the employee class, we came back here and we added tags to our first name text box, our last name text box, our hours work text box, and our hourly rate text box. All right. We've already added the code for our clear button. We've already added the code for our exit button. So we're going to take a break in just a minute. And after we do, we're going to talk about how you can put in numbers or a string here, a string here, a valid number here, a valid number here, click calculate, and not only fill in all these fields, but also add this person to a list of employees and have this printout and have this printout using that toString method that we just talked about. All right. So that's what we're going to do after the break. It's about 9:12 and I'm going to give you till 9:25. So let's take a break, come back in 12 or 13 minutes at 9:25, and we're going to write the rest of this. I'll see you in about 12 or 13 minutes. All right, I'll be right back. All right, as you can see by the clock, it is 9:25. What I've done here, and I just did this right before your eyes if you were watching, was I laid out the rest of this semester and then going into next semester for all of you. All right. So by the end of this week, really by today, we're through chapter 12. Now, we haven't taken the test on it yet. We'll do that next week. But the point is, we're through chapter 12. By this time next week, we will have taken hot number 5, which will be the test on chapter 12. And a week from today, I will lecture on chapters 13 and 14. The following week, I will lecture on chapters 15 and 16. You will have one test on all 4 of these chapters, but before you let that, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so much information. There's going to be a lot of stuff in there you won't have to worry about. We'll talk about it at that time. It's not that important to go over it right now, but this will be hot number 5. Let me add that. So that will be hot number 5, and it'll be on chapter 12. Then after we get done here with 16, we'll have hot number 6, and that will be on chapters 13 through 16. Then after we get done with this, there will be hot number 7, and that will be on chapters 17 and 18. And I'm going to talk to Mr. Gudmested, my counterpart at St. Louis, but to my knowledge, you won't have any more tests after that. Instead, there'll be a project that you'll have to work on, a final project. I've got to really write that out as soon as possible and get that to you so you know what it is you'll be working on. All right. So we will go over, this is all the database stuff in here. So we will go over that stuff. Then there'll be 2 weeks left in class if we can follow this. And they will be no lecture. This will literally be really 7 class periods. So when you think about that, so what is that? 6.5 hours a period, and you're getting 7 class periods. So 6.5 times 7 is approximately 45 hours to work on this final project and to do a student portfolio. Now, I'm going to one of these days, and I probably won't do it in front of you, but I'm going to show you how you can download some free software and do a lot of drag and drop for your portfolio, and you're welcome to do it that way. All right. And I'm also going to show you how you'll be able to save your portfolio out to something that's called GitHub Pages. All right. And you'll have that way before this. I'm going to try to make sure that in the next week or 2, I create that lecture that shows you how to do that. All right. I'm going to ask, the last day of class is the 17th, but I'm going to ask that by midnight on the 16th, so right as we cross over from the 16th to the 17th, that you have your final project turned in and your portfolio turned in. And I do that just in case you were to have any problems with either one of them. That'll give us time the next day. So if you've got your project turned in, your portfolio turned in, all of your work, you're done on the 16th. But if I need to, I'll have to try to contact people if there's problems with their project or with their portfolio or with turning in their homework. Now, Friday the 18th of August, I have to have grades in. Plus, there's a whole bunch of things that are called outcome assessments that I have to fill out. And each one of those takes about an hour to do. All right. And between figuring out final grades, setting up what are called your work ethic grades, and doing that, that'll take me all morning. So I really won't be available Friday morning. It's not a class day anyway. So that's why I want your stuff turned in by the 16th. If everything is cool, I can already start doing grades by the 17th. All right. I am taking a week of vacation. I haven't asked for it yet, but I think they'll give it to me on that week of like the 23rd, I think it is, or no, not the 23rd. It'd be the 21st. No, that's not right either. Um, yeah, the week of Monday, the 21st. I'll be gone all that week. All right. In fact, I'm going to be gone the weekend before. I'll be out, not just well, I'll be out of town at least for part of the time. All right. And so it'll be virtually very hard to get a hold of me. Finally, I believe, unless I made a mistake, and I don't think I have, that Monday, August 28th is when the fall semester starts. Yeah, I believe that that's right. Okay. So if you are going to be, if this is your first class right now, if AWD 1100 is your first class, then in fall you will be taking AWD 1000 Web Development Technology. That'll be the same time this one is. Well, really, I shouldn't say that. It'll be start at 8:05 a.m. as opposed to 8 a.m. And it will go to 11:55 a.m. Monday through Friday. And I'm the teacher for that. If you have already taken the AWD 1000 class, and this AWD 1100 class is your second class, all right, so you're kind of, uh, if that's the case, then you are going to be taking database-driven website development 2 in fall from 12:05 p.m. until 3:55 p.m., again, Monday through Friday. And again, I'm the instructor for that. I will take this and put it into a file. Let's save it right now. All right. And I'm just going to call it rest of semester and beyond .txt. And I will send that to you. All right. So you will have that along with, my regular email that I give you. Okay. So I just wanted you to have an idea of what was going on. All right. So we're going to jump back now and we're going to jump into our form. All right. The FRM employee form. And this is the stuff that we care about. So we've already gone through there. We've created the form. We did our validator program. We haven't called these methods yet. We call those from our form. But we did validator with our is present, our is decimal, and our is within range. Then we created our employee class, which had these 4 auto-implemented properties. This other non-implemented, just instance variable. And we put in the calculate gross pay and the toString. All right, so now we're up to here. So one of the first things that we're going to do in here in just a minute is we're going to put in that line of code that you see right there. List employees equal new list. It's again important that you understand this. What we're going to create in here is a list of employees. Each employee will have a first name, a last name, a number of hours they worked, an hourly rate, and a gross pay. Now, we're not going to make that into an array like we've been using. Remember, everything in an array has to be of the same type. Well, here we have decimals and we have strings, so we're going to use a list. So this will be a list of class employee. We're going to call our list employees, so that's the whole list. And this will basically create the new list for us. And then as it says here, every time we create a new employee, so every time we come in here and in what you saw let's see, where are you? Here. So if we do something like this, if we put in a first name and it's not empty, a last name that's not empty, an hours worked that's between 0 and 84, an hourly rate that's between 0 and 99.99, and we click calculate, two things are going to happen. First, it's going to fill out the gross pay for the employee, and it'll add 1 to this total employees, and it'll add, that to the total gross pay. And if necessary, it'll give us a new high or a new low gross, and it'll reconfigure the average. That's the first thing. Then second, it's going to call that toString method to fill in out that information about our individual employee. That's what happens when we click calculate. When we click show list, we are going to tell it to iterate over, use a for each loop to go through the entire list and call that toString method for each employee that we have in the list. All right. And that'll look more like this. Okay. Once we do that, and that should take somewhere around an hour, I don't know how much, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Then we'll take another break. And when we take that other break, I am going to stop taping. All right, because that'll be the end of this public taping. And then I'm going to start taping again after 15 more minutes. And I'm going to go back over the calculator program that we did yesterday. I made some changes to it. It works, but it works a funky way. So I want to show you all of that as well. That's what we've got to look forward to, or whatever you want to call it, for the rest of the period. So with that said, I'm going to go back to here, and I'm just going to open up my code window. All right. So again, we've already done the exit. We've already done the clear. So I'm not going to worry about those. All right. So we've got our calculate and our show list. But before we do those, I'm going to add some global variables and some global constants. So here will be our global constants. And they will be, you've already seen them, const, decimal, min hours, and that's going to be set equal to 0.00 m, const decimal max hours, and that's going to be set equal to 84.00 m. And again, this should make sense by now to each and every one of you that the fewest hours an employee can work are 0. The maximum hours that an employee can work are 84. All right. Then in much the same way, we're going to have a const decimal. And I called it min H rate for hourly rate. That's again going to be set equal to 0.00 m, and a const decimal max H rate, which we set equal to 99.99 m. So that right there is saying that an employee must make between 0, if maybe they're on vacation, or maybe they're volunteer or whatever, and 99.99 is the max they can make. These were just arbitrary values that I came up with for this program example. Now, I also made some global variables in here. Probably shouldn't have, but I figured this is already a big enough program that passing more and more and more and more and more stuff wasn't going to make a lot of sense. All right. Now, these variables, all right, and I'm trying to remember why I did it like this, but I've got that they're static. So we're going to keep them static. Oh, I know why. Okay. We want there to just be one of them. So we're going to have a static int that we're going to call total EMPs for total employees. And we're going to set that equal to 0. So every time we create a new employee, we're going to bump that total EMPs up by 1. All right. Plus, we're going to have static variables for these 4 things, or these, well, we just did these 5 things. We just did total EMPs. We're going to have one for total gross, low gross, high gross, and average gross. I have one for each one of those. So I'm going to have a static, and these are all going to be decimal. And we'll just start, we'll do them in order. So what were they? Total gross, low gross, high gross, average gross. Okay. So total gross, we're going to set that equal to 0. All right. Then we'll have low gross. Now I'm going to set that to an outrageously large value. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.00 M. And that way I can be 100% guaranteed that the first time that I come in here and put in a gross, it's going to become the low gross. It'll have to be, because the most an employee can work is 84 hours a week, and the most money they can make is $99.99 an hour. And I don't know what that is. It's probably around $9,000, but this is plenty big. So that'll become the low gross. Then I'm going to make a high gross. You've seen me do this kind of thing before. And that's going to be set equal to negative 1M. So whatever first value we put in there is automatically going to become both the low and the high. And that's what we want. All right. Plus we have in here an average gross as well. And we'll set that equal to 0.00 M as well. Now, again, I guess after a while, maybe part of my problem is that I'm starting to expect things from people. And maybe, you might even think, well, that's not fair. And you know what? You might be right. I don't know. All right. So you're here, 0.00 M. So it lines up. But I'm expecting that these variables that are in here, the constants and the variables, by now, they make some sense to you. This will be our total number of employees. This will be the gross for every employee added up. This will be the lowest gross of all employees, the highest gross of all employees. And this right here, you should already be able to figure out that'll be total gross divided by total employees. And again, like I said, at least ideally, all right, all of that is going to make sense to you. All right, I'm going to make 2 more variables that I'm going to create up here, and then we're going to start writing our calculate. All right. So what are they? Well, the first one will be, why I made it be these, well, I did anyway. This is private, and it's going to be employee. We're going to call it employee, and it's going to be equal to null. This is going to be our list that we just looked at. In fact, I should be able to take it and copy it right from here. Just like that. All right. Okay. If those two don't make sense to you, then bear with me for a little bit. Okay, this is going to basically be, I'm creating an instance of the employee class, but I'm setting it equal to null because we haven't made an employee yet. But employee is what we're going to be using for like employee.first name, employee.last name, etc. All right. So when we calculate, I'm going to call calculate individual employee gross pay. It's a long name, I get it. But I'm, again, trying to be as descriptive in here as I can. In fact, in that realm, let's go back in here. So this will be min hours worked by employee. This will be, talk about that in chapter 16. So max hours worked by an employee. Need this. This will be the minimum employee hourly rate. This will be the maximum employee hourly rate. This will be the total number of employees. This will be the total gross, all employees. This will be the lowest employee gross. This will be the highest employee gross. And the last one will be the average employee gross. I promised you I would try to put comments in here so you could see what was happening along the way. All right. This will literally be an employee. All right. And this will be the list of all employees. All right. So that's everything. That's our global constants. That's our global variables. All right. And then we're going to come in here, and you already know this, but this will be the code that will execute when the calculate button is clicked. In much the same way, I'm just going to copy this down. This will be the code that will execute when the show list button is clicked. All right. So this is, whoops, and I'm sorry, that's in the wrong place. The right line, but it's got to go here. All right. So think about what we want to do here. All right. Play computer. When we calculate the employee's individual gross pay, what do we want to do here? We want to make sure this isn't empty. We want to make sure this isn't empty. We want to make sure this has an actual value, a numeric value in it that's between 0 and 84. We want to make sure this has got a numeric value in it that's between 0 and 99.99. If all those criteria are met, then we want to call the employee classes calculate gross pay method to get this. And after we've done that, we want to increment our total employees by 1. We want to take that gross pay and add it to our total gross. We have to check and see if that gross pay is the smallest one that we figured. And if we have, we put it there. We want to see if that's the largest one we figured. And if it is, we put it there. Finally, we want to take our total gross divided by our total number of employees, and that becomes our average gross. So that's everything that we want to do. I guess I should say one more thing. In addition, we want to call that toString method on the employee and print out that employee's first name, last name, hours worked, hourly rate, and gross pay. So that's a lot that we have to do in here in this calculate. All right, so let's just start doing it. All right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a decimal value in here that's just going to be called gross pay. And I'm going to initialize it to nothing. We haven't figured out a gross pay yet. All right. Then the next thing that we're going to do, it's going to look very, 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 very similar to what we have been doing. And that is, I'm going to come in here now and I'm going to say, if is valid data. All right. And it's giving me an error on the if is valid data. Why? Because we haven't written it yet. We're going to write it right below this. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about any errors that we get right now. They will all be fixed in a matter of minutes. All right. So if is valid data, and what that means in English is if all, I should say each of our employee checks validate. So again, if first name is not empty, if last name is not empty, if hours worked is a valid decimal that's between 0 and 84, and if hourly rate is a valid decimal between 0 and 99.99. So if all of that stuff is true, then what do we want to do? Well, we're ready to create a new employee. All right. Remember, we did this up here where we created this null employee, but we did it for that name. So we want to come in here now and we want to say this. Now we can say employee equals new employee, and we want to grab txt first name dot text because that's the employee's first name. Then we want txt last name dot text because that's their last name. Then we want, since we already know that the hours worked and hourly rate are okay because we've already checked them in that is valid data. So we can say convert dot to decimal txt hours worked dot text. And then finally, we want to do one more convert dot to decimal for txt hourly rate dot text. We will need one more paren there. So we're telling it that if all of our checks pass, create a new employee based on what we have inputted. All right. All right. That's good. But there's more that we want to do here. So let's do the rest. So I'm going to say here, oops, instantiate a new employee object. All right. But remember, we now have 4 of the pieces we need for a new employee, but not the 5th. The 5th one is the gross pay. So we can say gross pay equal, and now we can grab this employee right here, and we can use one of the methods from the employee class. So employee dot, and notice that one of the things that's in here is calculate gross pay, which it looks like I spelled wrong. Boy, I can be an idiot sometimes. So let's fix that. Put another S in there, and let's save and go back to what we were working on. All right. So now let's calculate gross pay. Okay. Now we have all 5 pieces. Okay. So we can put up here, calculate gross pay by calling the employee classes calculate gross pay method. That's exactly what we're doing there. And like I said, I plan on trying to comment the wazoo out of this because I want you to be able to go back and look at this. And what you're doing right now is you're establishing an understanding of what we're talking about. All right. Okay. So we've got that. Next, we want to put the gross pay value into the gross pay text box. So txt gross pay dot text equal the gross pay we just figured out dot toString, but let's do that and format it for currency. All right. Now what else do we want to do? Okay. Now we want to come in and the next thing we want to do is update our total gross accumulator. Remember, that's all the grosses put together. So that was tote gross, and we want to say tote gross plus equal our gross pay. So we updated the total gross accumulator by adding the current gross pay to it. And we need a semicolon there. All right. So that's done. Then what do we have to do? We have to put the gross pay, update the total gross or tote gross. We call it total gross. Let's see, what do we call it? It's not giving me an error. Yep, it is total gross. Okay, so we want to update the total gross accumulator value in the total gross text box. So in other words, we want to say txt total gross pay dot text equals total gross dot toString currency. Hopefully this is all kind of coming together for you and making at least some sense as far as what we're doing. All right. It's a lot. I'm not saying that it's not. Again, the key to this is to start by reading chapter 12 in our text. All right. Next, I want to do 3 more things in here, and then we're going to go on and write this valid data. Now, I'm going to get errors because I'm going to call methods I haven't written yet. Okay. I'm going to call configure stats, and I'm going to pass to it my gross pay. Now, since that's giving me an error because I haven't written it, for now, I'm going to comment it out. Okay. After we do that, I want to add the current employee to the employees list. That's pretty easy. That's just employees dot add employee. All right. And then finally, I want to print the employee stats. And notice I'm commenting it out right away. All right. In fact, I'll put a comment above it. Print out stats or current employee. Now I haven't written it yet. So if I put this one and this one, if I grab both of those, all right, if I do both of those, I'm going to get errors because they haven't been written yet. So this will be update. I'm going to put it here, RHS text boxes. What does that mean? It's the text boxes on the right-hand side. All right. Now, what I mean in this, hopefully that made sense. And hopefully that makes sense. So this is going to grab whatever the gross pay is we just calculated, and this is going to put it into that text box. So that'll put it in here. Next, we want to add this to whatever was in here and update what's in here. All right. So that's what's going to happen here. And then we put the value in. When we call configure stats, rather than putting everything in this method, I'm going to add another method that's going to figure out this and this and this, and it'll add one to here as well. Okay. Again, I'm trying to run over with you exactly what I'm trying to do here. Then I'm adding this to that list of employees that I created here. That's here, that list. All right. And then finally, I'll be printing out all these stats. That will be all these stats that you see in this box here. All right. Like I said, I'm trying to run through this, and ideally, at least, I'm doing it in a slow enough way and putting enough stuff in here that it will at least make some sense to you. All right. So first one that we have that gives us an error is that valid data. So let's now write this one. Okay. So I'm going to come right down to here. And I'm going to put in my valid data routine. So this will validate the first name, the last name, the hours worked, and the hourly rate for each employee using methods written or located in the validator class. In other words, in the file that's called validator.cs. All right. So this will be a private. Notice that we are returning here. We're saying is valid data, which means it's going to return true or it's going to return false. So we have to make the type here a bool. And just so we don't get any errors, I'm just going to return true for right now. So there's no error there. And my error that we had up here is now gone. All right. So now we're going to come in here and we're going to run 2 is present text or checks, 2 is decimal checks, 2 is within range checks. If any of those fail, I'm not going to want to go on and create a new employee because I made a mistake. So I'll want to show the user that mistake and allow him or her to fix it. All right. If this returns true, it is a valid employee. So I can now go in and do all of this good stuff that I just mentioned to you. All right. So hopefully, like I said, that makes a little bit of sense. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a variable called success, the way they did it in the book, and set it equal to true. And then down at the bottom here, instead of returning true, I'm going to return success. Oops. And let me put in some white space in there. Okay, because there's a lot of stuff we got to do in here. All right, we're going to have a string in here that we're going to call error message. And we're going to initialize it to the empty string. So there's nothing in it right now. So the first thing we want to do is validate the presence i.e. a value in the txt first name text box. Okay, so our error message is going to be equal to or plus equal. We're just going to keep adding to it. Validator Notice when I put invalidator dot, it has is decimal, is within range, and is present. I want the is present. Present. And it even shows me, it says, hey, you're supposed to be passing in a string that represents the value and a string that represents the name. The value will be whatever is in, let's put this on 2 lines just so you can see all of it. TXT, first name, dot text. That's the first thing. And then we'll also need TXT first name. We want to grab that tag. Dot tag, dot toString. That will guarantee that either error message will still be empty or it's going to end up saying first name is a required field. All right, so that's the first one. Then we're going to do the same exact thing, but it's the presence, i.e. a value in the last name. All right, so this will have to now become last. And that will, and this will. So by the time we finished with these 2 checks, all right, what's possible? Well, both checks succeeded and error message is empty. That's first possibility. Second, there was nothing in the first name, but there was something in the last name. So we've got first name is a required field. Third, we had something in the first name, but nothing in the last name. So we get the message that last name is a required field. Finally, we leave them both blank. So we get 2 messages. One that says first name is a required field. Then on the next line, last name is a required field. All right. All right. And we're going to continue on. So that's the checks for our field, for our first and last name field. Now we've got to validate the value in the hours worked text box is numeric, really decimal. All right. So we're not going to call is present. We're going to call is decimal. I don't know why I can't spell today. Well, not just today. And again, we're going to pass in now txt hours worked dot text, little o, and txt hours worked dot tag dot string. That's why we put those tags in there. All right. Next, we have to validate what? That the value in the hours worked is within range. In other words, greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 84. So we're not going to call the is decimal now. We're going to call the is within range. Now, that one expects 4 parameters. That's why we're getting the error. I have to add to that min hours and max hours. And notice, no more error. Now, there's a lot of possibilities, but again, either the value was not a decimal and we'll get hours worked must be a valid decimal value if we left it blank or non-numeric. And if we put in a value that was less than 0 or greater than 84, we're going to get a message like hours worked must be between 0 and 84. Now, to save a little bit of time, I'm going to grab all this, copy it to the clipboard, paste it right back in again. All right, now we've done that one, that one. So now we got to redo these, but this will now be done with the hourly rate. So we're doing the same checks, except now instead of checking hours worked, we're checking hourly rate. So this is for the presence of a valid decimal value, and this will be that it is within range. Make sure that when you do this, this isn't min hours and max hours anymore. It's min H rate and it is max H rate. All right. So those are all 6 of our checks. Okay. Now, when we get done, if everything passed, error message is still empty. If we had one or more errors in here, so one or more things that didn't pass, then error message has got something in it. So I can say if error message dot trim, let's get any garbage that might be in there, if it's not equal to the empty string. What do we know? There was one or more errors. I'll put down here, first of all, that's a single equal sign. How about there were one or more validation errors? Okay, so if that's the case, we're just going to put in a message box. I didn't do a show message here. So a message box dot show. And I said here that error message. And we're put in here input error or errors. All right. And let's put in here the buttons and the error. Okay. And boy, sometimes you got to love that IntelliSense, the way that it kicks in for you. So if there were errors, we're going to show that whatever those errors were in our error message, which we kept using plus. So we were concatenating onto that. All right. And it's going to have a title of input errors. It'll have just an OK button, and it'll have the error icon. Then we're setting success equal to false. Now we're ready to return success. And you'll notice if you look in here, at least as of right now, there are no errors. All right. Now, I don't know if we run this. I don't know if we're going to get anything yet, but we're just going to look anyway. So save all. Let's try to run it and see what happens. I'm going to leave stuff blank. Click calculate. Notice what it says here. First name is a required field. Last name is a required field. Hours worked must be a valid decimal value. Hourly rate must be a valid decimal value. The name's first name, last name, hours worked, it grabbed those from the tags we added. If I do come in here and just put in a real huge number or a really small number and do this, now, well, for some reason it didn't give me those. I don't know why, but it should have. First name and last name are required fields. All right. It looks like it's having a problem right now with our range. We'll have to check on that. So let's see if we do put in something here and something here. Nope. It's figuring it out. So there is a problem right now. Let's see if we can quickly take a look here. Something screwed up. That's okay. We did the is decimal on hours worked, and that's hours worked. We did the is decimal on hourly rate and hourly rate there. So those checks are okay. Those parts are okay. So let's look at our validator class just to make sure that what we did was correct. All right. And it could be something else. It might clear itself out later, but the is present, those worked. The is decimal, that worked. The is within range, this is where we had a problem. I think the problem could be where we're using decimal number here. I'm going to see. I don't know if this will fix it or not. I'm going to remove it. It's going to give me errors, but I'm going to make that. I can't make that global because that's in here. Let's come in here. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I'm going to put in public and put in that decimal number. Okay. Now, notice in here, it's saying it cannot, let's see, number cannot declare instance variables in a static class. Okay, so it's not going to let me do that. Put it back down where it was. I want to put it back down here, right there, decimal number. I think this is going to work its way out as we go on. We'll see. If it doesn't, all right, we'll have to fix it. All right, so let's go back to our form. We now have under our calculate, okay, we can now go in and validate that our data is correct. So that worked. What do we want to do next? Okay. Well, we said if is valid. Okay. If is valid data, we want to be able to do this. Okay. Then we want to do this. Okay. Then we want to do this. Okay. Then we want to do this. Okay. That's all looks okay to me. In fact, let's see right now if I do run it and I put in valid stuff. Jeff Scott 40 20 and I click calculate. I'm getting a gross and my total gross is also done. If I click it again, there's 1600 and 800. If I do it again, how about if I put in 50? This should be 1100 then. It is. So I know right now, I know that all of this is working and 1100 and 800 and 800. Everything right now is working. So if you say, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And what about this? This is what we have to write next. All right. If you remember, we came in here and we took this configure stats where we're passing in the gross pay. All right. I'm going to say all right hand side except, and what was the one that was filled in for us automatically? That was total gross. And we don't even have to do total gross right there. We could do that in configure stats as well. Maybe we'll move that. And if you don't know what I mean, just bear with me for a second here. All right. So except, in fact, let's just say update all right-hand side text boxes. All right. This total gross pay, this stuff that we're doing right here, I'm going to move this. It's not the way that I did it in my example of it. So now I have to call configure stats and pass it the gross pay. Well, I want to put that right down below this. Okay. So this will be private void configure stats. And I'm going to pass it in a decimal, which will be the gross pay. All right. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update that stuff in here. All right. I could have called this update right-hand side text boxes. That might have been a better name, but that's what I'm doing. So now I've got the total gross. Also, what's another thing I want to do? Let's just do these in order. So the first thing that's in here is the total number of employees. Well, I now have a new employee or another employee. So in other words, employee instantiated. So increment total, we call it total EMPS. I don't remember. Total EMPS. Notice this one is right now is not grayed out because we are doing that one. So I want to increment total EMPS. By 1. We know to do that is to just say plus plus total EMPS. Now, once we do that, that also should not be grayed out anymore. And, well, it is. Not sure why, but it is. All right. So we now have that. In fact, well, let's we're going to say txt total employees dot text equal total emps dot toString. Now let's see if that's not grayed out anymore. Boom. So now we have to do our other 3. Our low gross. Remember, if it's the first employee, it should be less than $1 million. So that'll become the low gross. For high gross, it should be greater than -1. So it'll become the high gross. So the first time we run through this, the low gross and high gross will be the same. And the average will be whatever the gross pay was because there's only 1 employee. So let's put that stuff in right now. All right. So we've done all this. And you know what? To be honest with you, this configure stats, this is going to get real big real fast. So let's do this. I'm going to grab this and I'm going to call update total employees. It's going to give me an error because I don't have a routine like that. All right. So now I will write private void update total employees. And I'm going to paste in what I just took out. So now that's done. Next, I want to update update the total gross pay. Again, I'm getting an error because it hasn't been written. So let's put that right here. Private void update total gross pay and paste that in. All right. Now notice it needs the gross pay. It don't have it. So when I call this, okay, I need to pass the gross pay into it, which means I'll need to pass it in here. All right. So now when we call this configure stats, we're updating our right-hand side. So we're updating our total employees, then we're updating our total gross pay. So we've got total employees, total gross pay, then we need the low, then we need the high, and then we need the average. All right. So next, we will call update low or lowest gross pay. And I think it'll need the gross pay as well. All right. After we get done with that, we'll update the highest gross pay. And finally, we'll update the average gross pay. And I don't think it'll need that. Now I'm going to comment these 2 out until and then as I write them, I'll uncomment them. All right. So now we need update lowest gross pay, and we're going to pass in the gross pay. There's update total employees. There's update total gross pay. So we'll need a private void update lowest gross pay, and we'll have to pass in as a decimal the gross pay. All right. So now these 3, none of them have errors in there anymore. How do we do this? You know this because we've done it before. All right. So we're going to say if the gross pay is less than low gross, which was the variable that we created earlier up as we created it earlier as a global variable. So then we know low gross is now equal to the gross pay. And we can say TXT gross pay dot text equals low gross dot toString. Come on, it's an equal sign, Jeffrey. Like that. And the good news is, if I grab this, copy it to the clipboard, and put it in again, now we can write in quickly, update highest gross pay. And this will be if it's greater than high gross, then high gross is equal to gross pay. And we'll want to put in here high gross. They're the same program, except one or the same method, except one is it lower than the lowest? If it is, reset it. If it's higher than the highest, if it is, reset it. So now I can grab that other one I did here, the update highest gross pay, and now that one's done. So the only thing that's left is the average. All right. Again, I'm going to get an error because I'm going to comment that out. We don't have yet an update average gross pay. So there's our update total employees. There's our update gross pay. There's our update lowest employee. There's our update highest employee. So let's put in the last one. You'll notice there's nothing in there yet, but boom. No errors here. Plus, if we go up and look, now notice other than average gross, which we're about to write, none of these are grayed out anymore because we're using them all. And the good news is, with this average gross, it's only 2 lines. Boom. Now, are we done? No. All right. But we're sure as heck getting there. All right. If I go back up and look up here, well, we said that if all this stuff worked, we wanted to reset everything, configure our stats. We're doing that now, add it to the list. So the only thing that's left to do is to print out the employee stats. So we won't have that, but let's see how the rest of it looks. And again, there could still be errors in here. I don't think there are, but there could be. All right. I'm not printing out my low and high gross. I have to fix those. But notice everything else is working. If I do it again, this should be 16 and this should stay at 8. So that's working. I do it again. If I do it here with a 50, okay, it's all working, except I'm not printing out my low gross. I'm not printing out my high gross. This is why you should incrementally test this as you're going through here. And you'll notice now I can check to you and that's working. All right. So we're not printing out low and high gross. So let's look at why. EXT, average gross pay. That one's working. This is TXT high gross pay, and this is TXT low gross pay. That's the problem you run into when you do a lot of copy and paste. That's why even if you don't do any copy and paste, you should be looking all the time to see how stuff is working. Again, 40 and 20, boom. Okay, I can hit escape. I can do Jane Doe, and Jane worked 50 hours this week at $20 an hour. This should be 1,100. That should be 2. That should go up then to 1,900. That should stay at 800. That should now become 1,100. And this should be 950. Boom. Everything looks like it's working. All right, let's see if we can get a new low gross. So we've got Jane's husband, John, and John only worked 10 hours this week. So $200, that's our new low. 2,100 divided by 3 is 700. It appears as though everything is working. But we saw before that if I clear this and if I click calculate, we are getting our messages in here, but we're not getting our stuff in here. Our min and max does not appear right now to be working. So we'll have to check that out in just a bit. Now, the only thing that we have to do in here is to go back and in here where we did this and we said this print employee stats, that's print out stats for all employees. Now I'm going to get an error because that's not doesn't exist yet, but let's print it out. Now I'm going to do this twice. Let me say this again. I'm going to do this twice. Why? Why the heck would I do it twice? Because I want you to see why we are going to use that toString method. So we've got this print employee stats. Let's call that. We'll call that right after our configure stats thing, which is in here, and it's got all these things. So now we're going to come in here, private, void, print employee stats. Again, that error that we had in there before should now be gone. And it is. Now, nothing will happen when we call that because we haven't put any code in there yet. But we're going to put the code in there for that right now. All right. So the first time we do this, I'm going to fill up the list box. I'm sorry, I'm going to fill up the message box. And I'm going to put in here the old fashioned way. All right, the way we've been doing it. So I'm going to say string output str. I'm going to give it a title. I'm going to have it say employee info. Okay. All right. So, I mean, we could put any, anything we want in there. It really and truly wouldn't matter. But let's see. So I'm going to have employee info. That's not going to be the title. That's just going to be what's at the top. All right. And after we put in employee info, I'm going to put in a couple blank lines. All right. If you don't know why, again, just keep watching, please. Output str plus equal. Now we're going to say first name plus, well, we want to print out that employee's first name. And remember, we've got a thing called employee and dot. And one of the things that's in there is the auto implemented property first name. And we will add to that a blank line. In fact, I want to put in 4 more of these. All right, so after first name, we will put in last name. And this will be last name. And next, we'll put in the hours worked. All right. And let's just line those up a little bit. And this will be hours worked. All right. And let's see. Next, we'll have the hourly rate. and that'll be employee dot hourly rate. And finally, we'll have the gross pay. All right. And it'll be the employee dot what? We can't say there is no gross pay here. Can't do that. Ain't going to work. But remember, we do have a routine we wrote that was employee dot calculate gross pay. So we can call that routine dot toString, and we can make sure that's in currency format. All right. Now we've got everything set up. So all right. So now we can say message box dot show output string. We'll call it this employee's stats. Call whatever you want, doesn't matter. And again, we'll have a message box buttons. Okay. Now we don't want this to be a question. We'll put our own thing in here. So message box icon dot information. And it's giving me an error because I didn't put okay there. Okay, next message box buttons. Okay. What doesn't it like? There it is. Okay. Now let's see if that works. And then you're going to see something that I think, all right, this is me, is pretty darn freaking incredible. All right. So I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to just put me in there. So Jeff Scott worked 40 hours, makes 20 bucks an hour. Boom. There's everything. Okay. Well, I guess for some reason it didn't show that. That all worked, but why isn't it showing that? So let's see. Message box.show output string. Okay. Oh, I put this into show list. Why in the heck did I do that? I want to put it into print employee stats. But guess what? Show list is going to be pretty similar. All right, so let's try it again. It's in the right routine now. It's the right code. I had the right code, but in the wrong place. Now the right code is hopefully in the right place. If I ever do one of these lectures and don't make any mistakes whatsoever, then I am ready to retire. All right, 40, 20, boom. And there it is. Employee stats, employee info. First name, Jeff. Last name, Scott. Hours worked, 40. Hourly rate, 20. Gross pay, 800. These two fields are not formatted, so let's format those. Pretty simple. For the hours worked, we'll do a dot toString. And since this is hours, we'll put in here N2. And we'll do the other one. This will be a dot toString currency. Okay, let's run it one more time, make sure we didn't break anything. So Jane Doe, 40 and 40. Boom. Jane Doe, 40.00. Rate $40. Gross pay. Okay, it's all working. We're not done yet, but it's all working. Now, like I said, What I'm about to show you, maybe you could care less. But to me, this is why we do what we do. All right. What do I mean? I can grab all this code right here. Every single bit of this code, I am now going to comment out. Why? Because I'm going to replace it with one line of code, and that is output str plus equal employee. And what that's going to do is that's going to call that toString method. Okay? So let's see what that does. You saw exactly what was in here. But if I can replace, that's got to be a good 100 or more keystrokes with about 10 or 15. I'm taking it every time. All right. The only other thing I want to do is after I print all that stuff out, I want to call clear all so I can be sure that I'm starting, with a blank slate, so to speak, on my left-hand side. So let's try it again. Again, Jane's husband, John Doe, and John worked 35 hours and makes $35 an hour. Boom. Same stuff we had before. All right. Because we are now using string. I can't think of a better way to show you why you use object-oriented programming and how much code it can potentially, at least, all right, help you than what I just showed you. All right, now we're going to do a couple more things here. All right, I haven't given a break in quite a while, so I'm going to give one in just a minute. All right, we're going to come in here. All that's left, and it's not that small, but all that's left is for us to go in here and write the code for when we call show list. All right, and I'm just going to call this print out all values in list, which of course I'll get an error for because we haven't written it yet. So private void print out all values in list. All right. So it is 10:41. I'm going to give you 9 minutes. So please come back at 10:50. I'm refreshing my own water and we're going to finish this up. After we finish this up, I am going to turn off this tape. Then I'm going to show you my whole program for the calculator program. All right. That will be a private video. Please come back in 8 minutes at 10:50. Thank you. All right, let's write the last one here, which is print out all the values in the list. All right. Now, I am going to be able to steal a lot of the code that I had in here. All right, and I'm going to do it twice again. So let me just grab everything that's in here and actually put it in here. We're going to make changes to it, of course. So this is going to be fill up the list. Oops. Fill up the list the old-fashioned way. So instead of employee info, this is going to say list contents. All right. Now, what we want to do is we want to do all this stuff, but we want to do it in a loop because it's in a list. So I'm going to say for each employee, emp in employees. And now we're going to put all this in there. All right. I don't want this right now. So I'm going to grab all of this and I'm going to put it in here. Oh, darn it. X. All right, but I'm going to comment it out, or uncomment it, I should say. All right. And then we'll have all employee stats. All righty. Okay. This is doing it not like this, which we're going to change it to in just a moment. Okay. So file, save all. Let's run it again. I'm going to put in 3 employees. Okay. I'll have Mary Smith. Mary worked 40 hours and makes $30 an hour. So again, play computer. 1200, 1, 1200, 1200, 1200, 1200. Boom. Looks good. And it's got all of her information in there. Okay. All right. Next, we'll put in John Smith. John worked 30 hours and John makes $15 an hour. So this should be 450. This 2, 1650, 450, 1200, and 825. And again, everything looks like it's working. That's good. All right. So let's put in one more, and this will be Joan Black. And she worked 60 hours and she makes $60 an hour. I don't know what that'll be for the gross, but it should be a new high. All right, so let's just look. 4,200. So we had 1650 in there before, plus 4,200 is 5,850. That's 450. The last one we did previously, one we did was still the low. 4,200 is now the high. And 1950 times 3, that doesn't look, let's see. Yeah, that equals 5,850. Let's do one more. And I want to show you something here. 2 things. We're going to do 2 more. We're going to do me. All right. And I am a volunteer. So I didn't work any hours and I don't have an hourly rate. I just didn't appear this week. Notice it still works, but now I got 4. So my average went down. And let's also put in the max. So we'll say this is, I don't know, Blair Jones. And Blair worked 84 hours and Blair makes $99.99 an hour. All right. So you can see everything looks like it's been updated. That's good. Now we've gotten things for each employee. Now, when I click show list, there's all 5 employees. And unfortunately for me, when I did this, I didn't do a good job of putting my backslash ends in there. So we'll fix that in just a second. But everything, I think at least, is in there. And that's good. So let's fix that up first. So that was in here. All right, we need to have a backslash n after each employee. So let's do backslash n. I think that might fix it. So we'll run it again, but we'll only put in 3 employees to keep it simple. All right, so John Jones, 2020. Boom, there's John's stuff. Mary Green, 40. There's that stuff. All right. Ken Kramer, 75, 40. There's that stuff. Okay, so we've got our 3 employees. Now show list. There is Ken Kramer. Oh, they put in Ken Kramer every time. Well, that ain't good, is it? So either I did something wrong or something. Let's check. All right. So and I know what it is. All right. This, we don't want to say employee here. We want to say emp for all of these because that's the individual employees. So that should be emp. That should be emp. That should be emp. That should be emp. And that should be emp. Let's run it again. Mary Jones, 2020, boom. Ken Green, 40, okay. And Marge Johnson, 50. And now that's okay. Now show list. There is Mary Jones, there is Ken Green, there is Marge Johnson. Now I could do something where I was printing out the totals. This gets really big really fast though. All right. Okay, now let's talk about how we can make this quote better, unquote. All right. So just like before, I'm going to take every bit of this, every bit that's in here and comment it out. All right. Now this is going to be uncommented in just a moment. So I can come in here and say for each, just like we did, employee, emp in employees, just like we did. But now all we need is this line right there. And that's not employee again, that should be emp. So let's copy this, put it in there. And again, we don't want it to say employee, we want it to say emp. So again, notice this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. We've cut it in half. A hell of a lot less keystrokes. All right, we're going to try it and make sure that that works. And again, we'll just call this emp 1, 20, 30, emp 2, 40, 50, and emp 3, oops, 3, and we'll say 60 and 50. Show our list. All right, that wasn't formatted, but there's EMP1, there's EMP2, there's EMP3. So all I have to do is at the end of this, in fact, I'll put a couple \ns in there. So I think it'll take like that. And we'll check that out. We're almost finished here. We'll say 1, 20, 20, whoops, 20, come on, 20, 20, 2, 2, 40, 40, and 3, 3, 50, 50. All right, now we'll print out our list. There they are. There's 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 20, 20, 400, 40, 40, 1600, 50, 50, 27, 50. We have now completed all of our requirements. All right. So now I can take this, do a file, save all here, close this. All right. And this was my employee 12 pretest. So now I think I still have, yep, I still have that open. So you know the drill by now. So I can come in here. I've already set my origin there. So I can do my git add dot, my git commit -m, and I'm going to say chapter 12 pretest done Thursday, 6/26/2023. Going to add all that stuff, clear, git push -u origin master, spin baby. Give me my, okay, so clear. Let's go back to our GitHub repo and refresh. Pretest solution, chapter 12 pretest done, just put up now. So this will end up, for those of you who are following along with me, okay, this will end up, that would be the GitHub repo address. So what I'm going to do right now, and I'm sorry because I just had given you a break recently, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause until 11:20. I'm going to stop this to produce. Then at 11:20, I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you my calculator program. It has one error in it. Now I will quickly show you what that error is. If one of you figure out my problem, and I have many, but if one of you figure out my problem, please feel free to let me know. Where is it? That's it. So it gives the right answers. But if I come through here and run this now, gives you something we don't want. That is, if I type in 89 and do the square root, that's all cool. Clear. All right, if I type in 10 and do the reciprocal, that works. I can also do the back. Oh, maybe the back isn't working. Let's try that again. Let's clear, and we'll come in here 7, 8, 9. Yeah, back is working. Okay. But if I want to do 89 divided by 3, when I hit the divide, somehow that new value is being called. It's putting a 0.0 in there. I don't know why. All right. But if I divide that by 3, all right, again, it's skewing everything up in here, as you can see. So if I clear and I do 80, oops, I'll just do 9 divided by 3. I get the right answer. All right. But there's still an error in here. So I'm going to show you what I did, what I changed, etc. at 11:20 in 15 minutes. All right. So I'm going to stop the current tape and start up again at 11:20. Thank you.